Greetings, podcast listeners. Today is episode 82, all about spiritual traps and pitfalls. We go into different spiritual tools, people, and situations that might, in fact, not be the best thing for you, your spirituality, or your evolution. So check it out and enjoy the episode.
Let's get meta.
Welcome to Let's Get Metaphysical. I'm your host, Renata Maniaci, here to remind you that you are a divine spiritual being having a temporary human experience here on lovely planet Earth. Today's episode 82, is rather a continuation about the last episode, which is all about plants and drugs and how they affect your consciousness. This is a continuation of that and other spiritual traps and pitfalls that have come into my awareness lately that I would like to share with all of you. Today's bonus content is going to be a clearing, again, about the negative effects of any of this stuff if you have encountered it, and trying to clear any karma or karmic consequences that came along with that. I'll talk more about that at the end of the episode. But for now, let's just jump right in. Are you ready? Let's get meta. Masters and angels, I request your presence throughout this episode. Please allow what needs to come through clearly and effectively, and please allow whoever needs to hear this episode for it to reach them. Thank you with gratitude and full faith. So, spiritual traps and pitfalls, of which there are many, as I have been learning throughout these past few years. And it's no different in any other area of our lives, really. There are traps and pitfalls in every area. You know, you go out to buy a car, there's some great places to buy a car, and there's some not so great places to buy a car. You could really apply this to any industry. And in spirituality, there's a few things that I would like to talk about today on the heels of our previous episode, which talked all about the truth, about the spiritual truth about what happens when you're ingesting drugs and alcohol. And this was coming through as kind of an add-on to that for true aspiring spiritual awakening beings on this planet. If you are one of those people who is a spiritual aspirant and is sincerely trying to raise your vibration and gain higher levels of consciousness and just overall continue on your journey, that is who this is coming through for right now. And just like the other episode, our previous episode, there is no judgment in any of this. And actually, this topic is a little bit different today in that many, if not most, people who are on this path, who are maybe involved in some of the things I'm going to talk about, have no idea that there even are spiritual pitfalls in these things that we're going to talk about. So both the people who are spiritual seekers and the people who might be giving advice or trying to, shepherd people looking into their spirituality as a leader or something like that. So again, there's never any, on the highest level, there's never any right or any wrong. There are only lessons. And, there's a quick unimpeded way or a quicker unimpeded way to get to enlightenment and raise your vibration and attain more awareness, etc. And then there are longer ways to do that. There are longer routes that involve various obstacles. And the whole idea in this episode is to bring to awareness some spiritual obstacles that you may be facing that you don't even know that you're facing by using this spiritual tool or listening to that spiritual leader or whatever. So that is the intention of this episode. Take it however you want. As always, you and your high self are the best indicator of what is right for you and what resonates for you and how you need to move forward on your own path, on your own spiritual journey, always. And anything coming out of these episodes is coming through for some reason because there are folks out there that need to hear it. So let's begin by just doing a brief recap about our previous episode. The main point of that episode was that the use of any kind of drug, any kind of plant medicine, and any kind of alcohol opens you up, literally opens up your energetic field to allow negative beings in. And they will hang out there. You might not even know they're there. They might be sucking energy from you. They might be making you think weird thoughts or negative thoughts or depressing thoughts or fearful thoughts or anxious thoughts or anything like that. And in some cases, especially in the plant medicine case, for spiritual aspirants, another issue with that is that they make you think that you are at a higher level of spiritual growth than you are in reality. So that's the summary of the last episode, and I don't want to dwell on that, but just to throw out there for consideration, for awareness, is, it is so common in our culture, and by our culture, I mean like Western civilization, it's so common to drink alcohol. And I'm not looking down on anybody. I drink alcohol every once in a while when I feel like it, but it is not something that I do regularly. And it's never really been a huge part of my life. But it's not a huge thing at all now that I know what it does. But let's just open up our awareness for a second before moving on to the other list of things I want to talk about. Where is alcohol served? So obviously bars, and I think I mentioned in the last episode about all the negative energies that can be lurking around bars, depending on how open somebody becomes, how open their field is. It's just kind of like a buffet for negative entities, really, is bars. But where else do they drink a lot? Anywhere that there's alcohol and it is part of the nature of, sports, for example, a sporting event or a concert or other kinds of events, graduation parties, birthday parties, bachelorette parties, all of these things where culturally it has become acceptable to be intoxicated. And again, not looking down on this. This is just to open your awareness so that when you choose to engage in these activities or go to these places, even if you are choosing not to drink, be aware that everyone there's field, if they're drinking, is wide open, and those places attract negative energies because they're like, ooh, that person's field is open. Let me go attach to them. Ooh, look, there's a whole bunch of people who have open fields. Let's go. It's like open house. It's like an open house. So this is just to bring awareness, just having awareness. Weddings, sporting events, wherever. You might be thinking right now, wow, I went to that wedding and it was so much fun and it was great, but I felt like shit for days afterwards. Or I was having some really weird thoughts for the following few days. Or maybe you're having an experience right now where you're having a memory of attending an event or something else where, something negative happened that isn't usually in your MO. And it just you're thinking, oh, wow, well, that could have been brought on because my field was so open. Or this other person's field was so open who I was next to, for example, and I was influenced by that, or I was influenced by all these 30 or 50 or 80 or 200 or 5,000 intoxicated or people, or people on plant medicine, journeying, or people on drugs, etc. Okay, so I'm not going to keep going on that. I think you all understand that, but it's an awareness thing. So, moving on to other spiritual traps and pitfalls. Spiritual tools. There's certain spiritual tools that I just want to bring up into consciousness that everyone, including myself, thinks or thought that these are awesome things. These are very useful things. They are tools to help raise consciousness or to vibrate higher, etc., etc. One of these tools are singing bowls. Many of you have heard of them. They have crystal singing bowls and Tibetan singing bowls and metal and all kinds of things. And this did not come into my awareness until recently. However, when I tuned in with my intuition and sank in and asked the truth about this and asked my higher self about this, it rings as true. Many of these singing bowls open portals with the vibration that they make. And not all of those portals are portals that we want open, if you get the idea. And who would know that? Okay, I love singing bowls. I have a singing bowl. I don't play it anymore. It's not really an issue if you're not playing it. And, I won't go out there and say that all singing bowls open negative portals. I'm not going to say that because I don't know for sure. But I have checked in with my guidance and my high self, and it is true that many of these tools, these spiritual musical instruments, do open portals that negative energies and entities come through. That is real. And who knows that? I love going to sound baths with singing bowls, and I personally really love gongs, all kinds of things. So that is something for you to check in with your own self about, and your high self and your intuition, and see if that resonates for you. And if you are somebody who has a singing bowl or many, or has a whole set, check in about each of them, because you might be bringing through negative energies without even knowing it. And the people who sold it to you didn't even know that. This is something that has come in fairly recently into my awareness. So that is an example. And along the lines of other spiritual tools, there are crystals. I love crystals. I have many crystals. I have many friends who are crystal collectors as spiritual tools, use them for their own spiritual development and to raise the vibration of their homes, their rooms, different areas, and even land, raise the vibration of land. But there are also crystals that do the opposite. Crystals have devatas in them, if they can hold a charge. Many crystals can hold a charge, and what that means is just they can hold a higher vibration. They can hold beings in them, literally devas or devatas. And many of your crystals that you have may have these, but not all of them are good. And I had to learn this the hard way. I have somebody who is a mentor of mine who came into my house and looked at all my crystals and said, so you know that not all of these are holding a positive charge, right? And I was like, ugh, I figured that not all of them were. So it turns out that one of my crystals that I really used to like, that I bought in Peru, a smoky quartz, was just kind of dead. It was not holding a negative devata or entity, but what it turns out is that the person who cut it, or was forced to cut it, was kind of in like a slave situation, and therefore the energy that went into that crystal was no good, and it wasn't something that I would want to have in my home. And so I got rid of it. Now, that's a kind of neutral story because it wasn't necessarily causing me harm, but there are stones that do hold negative energies. And there are stones that actually don't do what the crystal books and the rock books and the gem books say they do. Just like I mentioned before, in every area, in all areas of life, there are people who know what they're talking about and get their information by, angels, higher level beings, or they get their information from lower level beings, or they make it up to make money and to sell things. Same is true in the crystal world. Same is true with many of the crystal books around there. And I'm sure that those of you who listen to or are familiar with crystals know that many new crystals keep being quote unquote found and given new names, etc., and given new properties and spiritual capacities and abilities every year. And a lot of that is just not true. It's not real. It's made up to get people excited and to buy more stones. So this is another situation where you get to go inside, call in your high self, call in your highest consciousness guides, and hold each of these crystals one by one in the palm of your hand or near your heart or whatever feels best to you, and ask if it is holding a positive charge or if it has the capacity to hold a positive charge. Ask if there is anything to worry about, any negative entity or negative energy or even dead energy on any of your stones. And if there is, have the detachment enough to let go of it. Have the understanding enough that if it's not helping you, you can let it go. So that's crystals, and that's any spiritual tool. I recently moved to a new place and I went through all of my spiritual stuff, and I had a whole bunch from different traditions, shaman stuff, plant medicine stuff, different kinds of oracle cards and tarot cards, all my crystals, sage, things that you light to clear spaces, candles, I mean, you name it. I had all kinds of things. And I went through and did this exercise. Well, I did a slightly different exercise that I can talk about a little later, but I did this exercise, which is essentially checking in to see if this thing was positive for me to keep and hang on to, or if it was negative, or if it was neutral. And I let go of everything that was neutral and everything that was negative. I've come to a point where I really only want things that are adding to the vibration, adding to raising my level of consciousness, adding to my vibration around me, especially if they're going to be in my home all the time. So there was a lot of stuff that I let go of. Some of the stuff my intuition said to bury, and some of it said it was like okay if I hadn't used it, to give away to Goodwill or something like that. And that's what I did. And I am suggesting that that might be something that you want to think about, going through all of your spiritual tools and really tuning in with them. Maybe you just start with crystals one day, and then you move on to your singing bowls, and then you move on to your oracle cards. And you know what? Things can change. Maybe your first oracle card deck was super important to your evolution, really, really helped you. And now the energy has shifted. And now it would just be kind of like you regressing and going backwards to keep using that. And you get to make all of these choices. But it's just about becoming more and more aware, more and more precise, because that's where we are right now in consciousness. We are becoming more refined. That's really what this episode is about. It's about becoming more refined in your spirituality, just because you got it from a crystal shop, just because you heard it from your psychic, just because you follow this person on Instagram, this spiritual teacher, and they have 1 million followers. It doesn't mean it is of the highest level of consciousness or that it is true. or that it is holding light, or that it is positive. All of these things can be compromised. And we're at a level of consciousness right now that demands refinement and purification. And it's easier, it's almost easier if we take that first step to purify and to refine everything in our life on this level. Because if we don't, it will come up in some way when it is ready. But we're at a moment right now where we can do this. You can take all of these spiritual tools and hold them and talk to them and ask if they're right for you. Ask your high self. Ask your highest guidance, and always make sure that your highest guidance is true. This brings me to the next spiritual trap and pitfall, your unseen guides. And I think I mentioned this in the previous episode. Are you really talking to Jesus? Are you really talking to Emmanuel or Archangel Michael or Shiva or Vishnu or Venus, the goddess Aphrodite? Are you really talking to who you think you are talking to? This is a basic question. And of course, we all believe and want to believe that we are talking to these beings that say or feel like they are that being. And I hope you all truly are. I do. It's in my best interest that you are all fully clear and aware that and communicating with the highest levels of consciousness that you can. So that is my hope. However, experience has taught me that this is not always true. And in way more cases than we want to know, it's not true. So what I suggest is that you sit quietly, just like you would with any spiritual tool that I was talking about, with the crystals, with every other spiritual tool, and you ask one by one. If you're like me, you might have, 5 years ago, I had a whole bunch of guides that I talked to, and I still can call them forward if I want to. But if I were you and you have some guides, or one guide or 10 guides or different beings that come in that you communicate with, one by one, go through them and really connect to your own high self, your gut, your intuition. And you call them forth and you ask them if they are sanctioned by the highest level of light and consciousness in the universe. Are you sanctioned by the highest light and divine consciousness in the universe? Are you the true Jesus that walked this planet? Are you the true Vishnu? And listen for an answer. If you're not getting a enthusiastic, resonating, knowing yes, then you might want to rethink and reconfigure who you think you're talking to. Because these beings, as far as my understanding goes, they're not allowed to lie to you. They're not allowed to lie to you. So if you hear a no, that's not who I am, or if you don't hear anything, if there's no answer, chances are you're probably not talking to who you think you're talking to. And you get to accept this. As somebody continuing on their spiritual journey, you get to digest this, be grateful that you now know that, okay, maybe I wasn't talking to Vishnu this whole time for the last 5 years. And I've been thinking and saying to everybody that I've been talking to Vishnu. You get to have the humility to accept that, digest it, and move on. And call in higher level guides that match your level of consciousness and that can help guide you. Or you listen to your high self, you listen to your gut, you really tune in to your inner being and you listen to what resonates with you. Go through every being and every guide that you communicate with, especially if you're taking orders from them, especially if you're saying, my guide told me this, or this is what's coming through right now. What is coming through? I can't be more emphatic about this. I'm sure that I have communicated with beings that are not who I thought they were. I am positive of it. And I continually check in with the guidance I'm getting to make sure that it is of the highest level and that it is positive for me and my highest good and everybody else involved. So I ask you to do the same thing as we go on this purification journey, as we go on this refinement journey together. It is in my best interest and all of our best interest to be talking and communicating with the highest level of consciousness possible. So that's unseen guides. This applies to your seen guides. This applies to humans. This applies to your psychic. This applies to your astrologer. This applies to your numerologist. This applies to your angel card reader. This applies to your animal spirit communicator. Anyone who is mentoring you in the spiritual arts, you need to be discerning. Be discerning. It is all too easy, especially when you start your spiritual journey, to listen to somebody who is actually getting their information from negative entities and negative beings. You must sink into your gut and you must fully resonate with anything that you are hearing, everything that you are hearing. If you are getting mentorship from somebody, especially if you're paying somebody for their services, for their information, for their healing, for their channeling. If it's a one-off, okay. You know, we all are interested in things like that. We all go to this reader or that reader, this psychic or that psychic, especially when we're first awakening. But if you are continuing to go to somebody over and over and over again, if you're continuing to give money to somebody over and over and over again, you best make sure that that is the highest level of true information, that their level of consciousness is very high, very clear, and very true. Right? I mean, people change their lives based on what their psychics say. They make decisions about who to marry and where to live, you know? So you have to make sure that this is coming from a high level of consciousness that has your best interest. If I'm talking about this right now and any of you are feeling queasy in the stomach while thinking about a certain person or mentor or spiritual guide or teacher right now, you want to examine that, okay? And there are some amazing spiritual teachers and guides and mentors out there. And you know what? Many of those amazing beings and amazing people may be bringing through untrue things for you, and they don't even know it because they don't know exactly where their information is coming from. And they think it's coming from Jesus, or they think it's coming from Metatron, and it's actually not. This is about refinement. This is about purification. This is about being humble enough to know that you don't know everything. This includes me. This includes everyone on their path. This is all about us refining into a higher level of consciousness together and safely with true information, good information that is good for you and good for the world. So go through all of your spiritual teachers and your guides and do that same thing. Feel it in your gut. Do you resonate with them or not? Do they truly hold your high interest and heart? What level of consciousness are they bringing through? And this is normal. When you start your spiritual path, you know, you are attracted to the level of consciousness that you're at, or just maybe hopefully a little bit above the level of consciousness that you're at. You know, your first psychic reading, fine. Your next psychic reading, it's a different psychic, fine. As you grow in your level of consciousness, you shouldn't probably be going to the same person that you started with, because as you raise your level of consciousness, you're going to have to find somebody else that matches your level of consciousness or is higher, right? You want to keep moving up until eventually you're so clear that you get everything that you need yourself. And that is the ultimate point. You want to be so clear that you are getting all this information yourself. You don't need anything. You don't need a tool. You don't need a crystal. You don't need a psychic. You don't need drugs. You don't need alcohol. You don't need plant medicine. You just need you. And you connect to your inner self and you connect to your cosmic self and you know everything. And you get the answer. And you know how to move forward in the best possible way for you and the world. Because we're not just here for us. We're here for the world. And that brings me into ego. And I'll just touch on this because I already touched on it a little bit. If you have a spiritual teacher, or you're listening to YouTube people or Instagram people or any other kind of people that say I a lot, okay? That's how they open. I wrote this book. I did this thing. I got this channeling. I had an experience and I saw this vision. Me, buy my book, buy this, buy that. I have all the answers. Ego. Okay? We all fall into this trap. We all are this trap sometimes. Ego. Somebody who is truly spiritually pure and conscious does not need to promote themselves, does not need to look for followers, does not need to do everything they can to find money. But money is good. I'm not saying that all spiritual knowledge should be given freely. That's not it. It's an exchange. It is okay for people to charge money for their gifts. That's okay. But it needs to be balanced. It needs to be heart-centered. It needs to be true. It can't be a gimmick. It can't be a scam. It can't be, I'm telling you this, but this is actually bullshit. It can't be, this is what my guides are telling me, but you're coming up with it from your own mind and your own imagination. It has to be true. So ego, especially spiritual ego, okay? Examine these people around you. Examine yourself. Are you going around saying, I got this from Metatron. I got this from this person. Examine that, because that's a certain level of consciousness. Again, there's no judgment here, folks. All of these are growth experiences, learning opportunities for us to move forward on our journeys. All of this. And it's all perfect. It's all perfect. Look at me. Look at the first 2 episodes of this podcast, which I've left up on purpose to demonstrate my own spiritual journey. John of God. You think he was talking to the light angels? No, he was talking to angels of darkness, which are very powerful, very clever, very manipulative, very powerful, can heal just like an angel of light. Okay? I've been through it. You've probably been through it. But now is a time for refinement. So I think that is the main things that I wanted to bring up today. It's just really, it's about asking, does what I'm doing create negative karma? Is what this person is telling me true? Does it resonate with me on the highest level? Do I know this to be true? Is this right for me? Or does my ego just like to hear it? Does my ego like to hear this? Or do I, from the core of my being, know that what I'm being told is true? Do I, at the core of my being, know that when I hold this crystal, I feel so good and it raises my vibration? Do I, at the core of my being, know that who I'm communicating with telepathically is who they say they are? Refinement. Ask your high self. That's how you do it. Ask your high self. Connect with your high self and ask, because your high self will never lie to you. All right, I will leave it there for now. Bless creation. And there you have it, listeners. I hope you enjoyed that episode and I hope you found it useful. As always, use your own judgment and intuition about anything you learn from this show. Take it or leave it. These are things that come through periodically that are hopefully helpful to all of you, or at least some of you, on your soul's path and your soul's evolution. If you are interested in hearing the bonus content clearing for this episode, I do a clearing about all of this stuff, clearing any negative effects of all of these tools, guidance, both physical and invisible, that you may have picked up over the years, over this lifetime and over other lifetimes, as much as we are allowed to clear. If you're interested in that, please go to patreon.com/letsgetmeta to access that. And you will have access to all bonus content, exclusive content, all clearings, all activations, etc. by becoming an angel donor of any tier, any level. I'm going to leave it there for today. Thank you so much for listening. Stay positive, stay safe, and stay meta.
The Let's Get Metaphysical podcast is an Up, Up, and Awaken production. Our intention is to raise the vibration of the planet by sharing, validating, and normalizing spiritual and metaphysical experiences. If you are ready to raise your vibration, you might enjoy our free Let's Get Meta Master Clearing. To receive the Master Clearing or to learn more about the podcast, visit letsgetmeta.com. The show is produced and hosted by Renata Maniaci. You can access more awakening content, join our membership community, or become one of our angel donors by visiting upandawaken.com. Thank you for listening. Stay meta.
Let's get meta.
Metaphysical.
Let's get meta.
Metaphysical.
Let's get meta.
Metaphysical.
Let's get meta.
Metaphysical.